Give me a chance to prove it to you. Let me show you the facts. Let me show you the evidence. I will not give up. I will not give in. Please.
Politan, the subject of my investigation is the death of a father of three who died after drinking a Moscow Mule prepared by his wife. Prosecutors say it wasn't a plain Moscow Mule and have charged her.
March 4th, 2022. That is the date that changed everything for one family in Park City, Utah. That is the date Eric Richins, a 39-year-old father of three, a hard-working contractor, a man who had warned his family that something might happen to him, was found dead in his own bed.
My sweet baby boys. And as much as you've been influenced into thinking that Dad was murdered, that I took your dad from you, that is completely wrong. An absolute lie.
His wife, Kouri, called 911 in the early morning hours. She told the operator she had fallen asleep putting one of their children down for the night, and when she returned to their bedroom, she found Eric cold to the touch and not breathing.
911, what's the address of the emergency?
My husband's not breathing. He's cold. I just came in the bed, in our bed, and I turned over, and he's just cold. He's just cold.
So what happened today?
He was just fine. We were fine. I don't know. It didn't make sense.
3 boys aged 5, 7, and 9 woke up that morning without a father. And nearly 4 years later, after one of the most closely watched criminal trials in Utah history, the woman who made that 911 call was sentenced to spend the rest of her natural life behind bars. No parole, no second chances, no way out. This is the full story of Kouri Richins, the debt, the affair, the fentanyl, the children's book, the trial, and the verdict that stunned even the people who were certain she was guilty. Stay with us, because every single layer of this case is more disturbing than the last. To understand what happened inside the Richins home on the night of March 4th, 2022, you first need to understand who Eric and Kouri Richins were, or more precisely, who they appeared to be. From the outside, the Richins family looked like a Utah success story. They lived near Park City, home to some of the most famous ski resorts in the country. They had a beautiful home, 3 healthy boys, 2 careers, and the kind of lifestyle that photographs well on social media. Eric Richins built that life with his hands. He ran a lucrative contracting and stone masonry business that was doing well. He was, by all accounts, the financial engine of the household, steady, reliable, devoted to his sons. Friends and family described him as a man who showed up, who worked hard, who loved his kids fiercely. Kouri Richins, 31 years old at the time of Eric's death, had her own ambitions. She worked as a real estate agent and had thrown herself into the world of house flipping, purchasing distressed properties, renovating them, and selling them for profit. On the surface, she presented herself as driven, entrepreneurial, and successful, a woman building something of her own alongside her husband's career. But that image was a lie. By the time Eric Richins died, Kouri's house-flipping business had accumulated liabilities of nearly $8 million. $8 million. She had stretched herself across multiple properties, taken out loans, overextended at every turn. Her most recent and most ambitious purchase was a nearly 10-acre estate outside Park City known as the Midway Mansion, a property she hoped to flip for close to $10 million in profit. It was the biggest bet she had ever made, and the financial pressure it created was suffocating. Kouri was not just in debt, she was in crisis. And Eric's death would have solved that crisis immediately. Between his contracting business, his real estate holdings, and his life insurance policies, Eric Richins was worth over $4 million on the day he died. That money in Kouri's mind, according to prosecutors, was the way out, the escape hatch, the solution to every problem she had created for herself. But money was not the only thing driving what happened next. There was also a man named Josh Grossman. For approximately 2 years before Eric Richins died, Kouri had been conducting a secret affair with Josh Grossman, a handyman she had met through her house-flipping business. While she was married, while she was raising 3 sons alongside Eric, she was exchanging text messages with Josh that read like something out of a romance novel. She told him life was going to be different. She asked him if he would marry her if she were divorced. She wrote about wanting to cuddle him on the couch and watch murder documentaries. That last detail is almost too on the nose to believe. But it happened. Roughly 3 months before Eric died, Kouri had gone even further. She made a reservation at a luxury Caribbean resort, the Secret Saint Martin's, for herself and Josh Grossman. The trip was scheduled for April 2022, 1 month after Eric's death. She had booked the getaway before Eric died. She had planned the future before Eric was gone. And there was one more conversation that Josh Grossman revealed to investigators, a conversation that, under the circumstances of Eric's murder, became one of the most chilling pieces of testimony in the entire trial. At some point during their relationship, Kouri had asked Josh, who had served in the United States Army and deployed to Iraq, whether he had ever killed anyone. And then she asked him how it made him feel. Josh testified about that exchange from the witness stand, clearly still disturbed by it. He had reached out to Eric's family after Kouri was arrested, overwhelmed with guilt over his role in the affair. He cried on the stand. Jurors felt sorry for him. And what he described painted a picture of a woman who had been mentally preparing herself for something a long time. Before March 4, 2022, Eric Richins knew something was wrong. In the months leading up to his death, he had privately warned his family. He told them to watch out for Kouri. He told them that if anything happened to him, they should look at her first. He expressed to people close to him that he believed his life could be at risk. That warning, devastating in hindsight, proved to be exactly right. On the evening of March 4, 2022, Kouri Richins later told investigators she and Eric had been celebrating. She claimed they were toasting her upcoming close on the Midway Mansion deal, the biggest real estate transaction her company had ever done. She described preparing drinks for the two of them around 9:15 that evening. What kind of drinks? Either a Moscow Mule or a lemon drop shot, the prosecution would argue at trial. It was one of these two cocktails that Kouri prepared and handed to her husband that night. Inside a kitchen cabinet in the Richins' home, investigators discovered a handwritten note in Kouri's handwriting. On it were 2 words: "Drink in bed." The prosecution argued that the note was not a loving gesture. It was a blueprint, a reminder to herself of the plan she had set in motion. According to the state's theory, Kouri dissolved fentanyl pills, an extremely potent synthetic opioid capable of killing a person in a fraction of the dose that would be fatal with heroin or morphine, into that drink. She handed it to Eric, and then she waited. Eric Richins went to bed. He never woke up. In the early morning hours of March 4th, Kouri placed a 911 call. She told the operator she had been asleep in another room with one of her children, and when she returned to the bedroom, she found Eric cold and unresponsive. The operator immediately instructed her to put the phone on speaker and begin CPR. Kouri said she had done so. She later described the scene to her friend Chelsea Barney in a series of text messages, saying she had pumped Eric's chest so hard that she had been screaming at him to come back to life, that she needed him. But the evidence said otherwise. A digital forensics expert testified that the proximity sensor inside Kouri's phone, the sensor that activates when a device is held up to a human ear, showed that Kouri never actually put the call on speaker. She was holding the phone to her face the entire time, which means she could not have been performing 2-handed chest compressions. If she was doing CPR at all, she was doing it one-handed. And the prosecution went further. Using a stopwatch during closing arguments, they demonstrated to the jury that approximately 6 minutes elapsed between the moment the 911 operator told Kouri to begin compressions and the moment she actually appeared to start. 6 minutes. Her husband was dying. She waited 6 minutes. First responders arrived, but it was already too late. Eric Richins was pronounced dead. What Kouri Richins did in the hours and days following Eric's death became some of the most damaging evidence presented against her at trial, not because of what she said, but because of what she did. Deputy body camera footage captured the scene at the Richins' home shortly after Eric's death. Jurors who watched that footage were struck by one thing above everything else: Kouri's demeanor. She stood holding her face in her hands, her body turned inward, seemingly hiding her expressions from the officers and first responders around her. There were no visible tears, no visible breakdown. Her effect was described by jurors as strikingly flat. Now compare that to the moment Eric's sister Kouri Richins arrived at the house. According to jurors, Katie was hysterical the second she walked through the door, near hyperventilating, barely able to speak, her first words asking where the children were and whether they were safe. The contrast between the two women on that same footage, at the same moment, in the same house, was in jurors' words startling. Kouri had searched luxury prisons for the rich in America. She had searched, how long do life insurance companies take to pay? She had searched, if someone is poisoned, what does it go down on the death certificate as? Defense argued those searches were understandable, a frightened woman trying to process the situation after police had already arrived at her door with a warrant. Jurors were not persuaded. Those searches, they said, pointed to a guilty conscience. When Eric Richins died in March 2022, authorities initially could not rule out accidental overdose. Eric used marijuana gummies recreationally. There was an empty hydrocodone bottle on his nightstand, a prescription that had expired in 2020. He had recently taken a trip to Mexico, but toxicology confirmed that Eric had died from a lethal dose of fentanyl. And as investigators dug deeper, the accidental theory collapsed. The key to the entire case, the thread that connected Kouri directly to the fentanyl, ran through her housekeeper. A forensic expert testified that between Kouri's phone and Carmen's phone, investigators had identified approximately 800 deleted text messages. The content of those messages had been wiped, gone forever. But the metadata could not be erased. The dates and timestamps of those 800 messages corresponded precisely with Carmen's account of when she and Kouri had been communicating about obtaining drugs. 800 deleted messages. Right on schedule. Jurors believed Carmen Lauber. Her testimony, they said, was impactful, important, and corroborated at every turn. March 4th was not, prosecutors argued, the first time Kouri Richins had tried to kill her husband. 2 weeks earlier, on Valentine's Day 2022, Eric Richins became suddenly and violently ill after eating a breakfast sandwich that Kouri had prepared for him. He reacted so severely that he had to inject himself with an EpiPen. At the time, the group of friends they were with laughed it off. Kouri's friend Allie Staking testified that everyone joked about it. Someone even said, "Don't eat what Kouri feeds you." Eric himself didn't appear angry or suspicious afterward. It was written off as an allergic reaction. On Valentine's Day, it was a sandwich. When she murdered him, it was a drink. The jury agreed with that interpretation. They found Kouri guilty not only of murder, but of attempted murder, specifically for what happened on Valentine's Day. By the time the prosecution finished presenting its case, the motive for Eric Richins' murder had been laid out in exhaustive detail. It was not a single factor, it was a convergence of financial desperation, romantic obsession, and cold calculation. Kouri was nearly $8 million in debt. Eric was worth over $4 million. That gap alone was the entire story for some jurors. But Kouri had also taken deliberate steps to maximize her payout. Approximately 1 month before Eric died, a new life insurance policy appeared in his name, a $100,000 policy. The problem was that Eric had not signed it. A handwriting expert testified at trial that the signature on the document and Eric's known signatures were not written by the same person. The signature was a forgery, and it was Kouri who had taken out the policy, using her business address, naming herself as the sole beneficiary. She did not just need Eric dead, she had been building the infrastructure of his death quietly, methodically. In the months before March 4th, and layered over all of it was the affair with Josh Grossman, the resort booking, the promises of a new life. Prosecutors argued in their closing that Kouri Richins had mentally already left her marriage long before March 4th. She was not a desperate woman who snapped. She was a calculating woman who planned. She wanted Eric's money, she wanted Josh Grossman, and she wanted out of the life she had built, and she engineered all three outcomes simultaneously. Eric had to die. There was a way forward, and that was it. The trial of Kouri Richins opened in February 2026 in Summit County, Utah, nearly 4 years after Eric's death. The courtroom was packed. The case had attracted national attention, in no small part because of a detail that made the whole story almost surreal. While under investigation for her husband's murder, Kouri Richins had written and published a children's picture book. It was called, "Are You With Me?" She said it was designed to help children, including her own 3 sons, cope with the death of a loved one. She dedicated it to Eric, calling him her amazing husband and a wonderful father. She was the author of a grief book. She was also the person prosecutors believed had caused the grief. That detail became a symbol of the entire case, the facade, the performance, the audacity. Chief Prosecutor Brad Bloodworth spent 3 weeks and called 40 witnesses, building the state's case, piece by piece. The 911 call, the body cam footage, the digital forensics on the phone, Carmen Lauber's testimony, the forged insurance policy, the handwritten note in the kitchen cabinet, Josh Grossman's testimony about the affair and the resort booking. The internet searches, the Valentine's Day sandwich, the deleted text messages. The financial records show $8 million in debt. Every piece reinforced the others. The prosecution was methodical and thorough. On March 12, 2026, after 3 weeks of testimony and 40 witnesses, the prosecution rested its case. Every person in that courtroom expected what would come next. The defense calling its own witnesses, presenting its own evidence, building its alternative theory in front of the jury. Instead, Judge Richard Mrazek turned to the defense table and asked, "Who is your first witness?" There was a pause, a whispered consultation between attorneys Nestor and Lewis, and then Wendy Lewis stood up and said, "Your Honor, at this time the defense intends to rest. No witnesses. No testimony, no evidence presented. Nothing." The reaction in the courtroom was immediate. Juror Laura, who would serve as the foreperson, said her mouth dropped open. She was shocked. She was disappointed. She felt like the defense had denied the jury access to the full story, the drug use, the chronic pain, the Mexico theory, without ever actually backing any of it up. Kouri Richins herself waived her right to testify. She confirmed to the judge that she understood her right and was choosing not to exercise it. Legal observers pointed out the logic behind the decision. If your team believes the prosecution has not met its burden of proof, calling witnesses only creates new risk. Every witness you put on the stand can be cross-examined. Every new piece of evidence you introduce can be used against you. The defense appeared to believe they were winning, that the state had not done enough. Kouri herself, according to people close to her, was completely calm heading into deliberations. Upbeat, convinced she would walk free. The jury of 8 people deliberated for approximately 3 hours. 3 hours for a murder case. After 3 weeks of evidence and 40 witnesses spanning nearly 4 years of investigation, when foreperson Laura returned to the deliberation room, she said she could see it written on every face around her. Everyone was ready to speak. When she shared her own view that the evidence against Kouri was devastating, that she was guilty, she said it was like opening a door. Everyone walked through it. The verdict was unanimous, on every count. On March 16, 2026, Judge Richard Mrazek read the findings aloud. Count 1, aggravated murder. Guilty. Kouri Richins was found guilty on all 5 counts: aggravated murder for the death of Eric Richins, attempted aggravated murder for the Valentine's Day sandwich, 2 counts of insurance fraud and forgery. She had been absolutely certain she would walk free. Her friends described her reaction to the verdict as devastating, crushed, heartbroken, totally unexpected. 2 months after the verdict, on what would have been Eric Richins' 44th birthday, Kouri returned to court. She arrived in a prison uniform, in shackles. Kouri's supporters spoke in her defense, her brother Ronnie insisting the jury had gotten it wrong, friends describing a loving and generous woman. And then Kouri herself spoke for about 30 minutes, addressing her children directly. She maintained her innocence completely. She told her boys that the idea that she had taken their father from them was completely wrong and an absolute lie. She expressed regret, but not for killing Eric, for the jury's decision. She was sorry, she said, that 8 strangers had been given the right to determine her family's future. Judge Richard Mrazek sentenced Kouri Richins to life in prison without the possibility of parole. A person convicted of those things is simply too dangerous to ever be free. Kouri Richins will die in prison. Eric Richins' 3 sons are now living with his sister Katie and her husband. The family has done everything in its power to shield them from the media attention. The boys have lost both parents now, one to murder, one to a prison cell she will never leave. If this story moved you, if it made you think, made you angry, or just made you grateful for the people in your life, hit the like button right now, and make sure you are subscribed so you never miss another case like this one. Ring that notification bell. It takes 2 seconds, and it means everything to this channel. Leave a comment below and tell us what moment in this case hit you hardest. Was it the children's book? The 911 call? The 6 minutes? The boys' statements? We read every single comment, and we want to hear from you. We will see you in the next one.